Thank you, Steve. I don't think I ever thought I'd be introduced as having, when I was, in my 20s, like most of us, I didn't think I'd ever be introduced as having 40 years experience in anything. Thanks for being here today. It's an important day for Noia. I'm going to be talking about a strategy that we've worked on for the last couple of years called Redefining Oil. And I guess one would say, why would you need to redefine oil? Hasn't it just redefined itself at $45 a barrel? And you'd be right, of course. The world has changed with $45 oil, albeit temporarily. When I was thinking about what I'd say today or how I'd open this up, I was reminded of the famous first line of A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. In Newfoundland, prospectivity and Labrador, prospectivity has never been as high. Record land sales. Our fourth production field going into production next year, thanks to the good work of Exxon. 1.8% of our, 1.6% of our total offshore acreage contains 12 billion potential barrels of oil. The best of times for Newfoundland, and the worst of times because it's $45 a barrel now, and it's expensive to get at. But we all recognize, as tough as it is for everybody in this room, in their own business, we all recognize that this is a valley. And we've seen these valleys before, and in 2 or 3 years, we all recognize that oil will be back at, everybody sort of acknowledges, and I might be proven wrong here later, oil should be at $80 a barrel again. So a 3-year valley or a 4-year valley in the oil industry is like a blink in the overall industry. So we still thought, excuse me, we still thought it was a good time to do our Redefining Oil because it is just a valley, and while you're in the valley, it might be the best time to prepare for the hills that are coming. So, and I want to acknowledge, because there's been a lot of, this is sort of a monumental thing that Noia has worked on for the last couple of years. I want to acknowledge some people who are in the room. John Henley is the past chair of Noia. The board of directors is here. Byron and Bob, who have led this from an employee point of view. The Board of Trade, Kim is here this morning, have all been consulted heavily. So thank you very much. And I'll get into now the text. You thought I was finished, didn't you? I'll get in now to the text of the speech. As this year's chair, it gives me great pleasure to open today's event with the official launch of something that Noia staff and board had been working on for the last couple of years, and it's called Redefining Oil. But before we get into the meat of it, let's take a few minutes to speak about Noia and its role in the industry and in the province. The Newfoundland and Labrador Oil and Gas Association, or Noia, was founded in 1977. And represents the supply and service sector in the province's oil and gas industry. I'm pleased to say that it's the largest offshore petroleum association in Canada, excuse me, with approximately 630 member companies from around the world. I'm sorry for the cough thing. Most of you would know I don't smoke anymore, but I do have a cold. As a member-directed association, Noia provides members with access to business opportunities, is a voice for the supply and service sector through advocacy, promotes the industry to national and international audiences, and facilitates networking through a wide range of programs and events, including its flagship, the annual conference. Let's now take a few moments to take a look at the oil and gas industry and what it means to our province. As noted on the screen, the oil and gas industry is the largest contributor to the province's GDP. In fact, oil and gas extraction and support account for about 28% of our province's GDP in 2013. As for the, as for the fiscal year 2013-2014, offshore oil royalties accounted for 28% of all provincial revenues. The industry is also a very important contributor to employment here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Despite a tough year with falling oil prices, which resulted in layoffs in many areas of our industry, the industry remains and will continue to be an important employer. Sorry. Of the nearly 12,000 people working in the industry last year, fully 10,000 of those people were from Newfoundland and Labrador. And oil companies have invested. Oil companies have seen the value of our industry and have contributed significantly. You can see that here that since 1975, oil companies have invested $43.5 billion. Not only has the investment already been sizable, but we also know that the potential for offshore oil, that the potential of our offshore is at a level we had never even imagined. As the province recently announced, a resource assessment revealed incredible oil and gas potential for the 2015 license round area in our offshore. The area, covering a mere 1.6% of our offshore, reveals that in-place oil and gas resource potential of 12 billion barrels of oil, as I already mentioned, and 113 cubic feet of gas. That places Newfoundland and Labrador among other hotbeds of exploration, such as the Barents Sea and West Africa. This announcement and the scheduled land sale process, which Noia lobbied for vigorously on behalf of its members, is a game changer for the industry. For the first time in the history of Newfoundland and Labrador's offshore, we knew in advance of the land sale and the oil and gas resources contained in our waters in advance of the land sale. As this approach, this approach certainly paid off, as in the 2015 sale resulted in the highest ever value ever seen in the province for an offshore sale, over $1.2 billion in work commitments and 3 new players to the industry. In fact, these work commitments of $1.2 billion bring the total work commitments to in the Flemish Pass to $2.3 billion since the first land sale in that basin, which was not too long ago. Similar oil and gas assessments will be carried out in advance of all future land sales going forward. We know that this will attract more entrants and result in more informed and competitive bidding process. Just this week, we learned that Statoil are exiting Alaska. Clearly, in this industry downturn, operators are deciding where to invest their money, and it is promising to see the value they place on the resources in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm pleased to say that Richard Wright is here today as well, and will be giving a very informative presentation on the assessment process and Nalcor's other seismic and geoscience work. And I also see Jim is here today as well, and Noia has always been a huge fan of the work that Nalcor, Jim Keating's crew is doing, and we want to continue to support that and congratulate him and thank him on behalf of the industry. It is important to note that, as I mentioned, the area that Nalcor assessed and found the potential for 12 billion barrels of oil is, as I said, 1.6% of our total offshore. That means the potential is absolutely massive. To put this size in perspective, Newfoundland's sedimentary basins are 45% bigger than Norway's, 50% bigger than the Gulf of Mexico, and 67% bigger than the UK's. We can see where our industry is going. I just want to be around for another 30 years to make sure to watch it happen. When we speak about our potential, it's always interesting to make the comparison to Norway. In Norway, at the end of 2014, 78 fields were in production, 61 in the North Sea, 16 in the Norwegian Sea, and 1 in the Barents Sea, while a further 11 were still under development at the end of the year. Newfoundland has 4 fields, 3 producing and 1 in development. Why is the industry, the comparison to Norway so important? because Norway strategically defined the industry that they wanted 30 years ago, and they set about achieving that. They found technological solutions, they found export markets, they made the decision not to rely on producing a lot of things or on manufacturing or, God forbid, fabricating. Instead, they saw the long-term value in leveraging engineering and technology solutions for the global industry, not just the Norwegian industry. Noia believes Newfoundland is where Norway was in the 1970s. There's no denying that as a province we have done pretty well. The oil and gas industry has been a significant contributor to the provincial economy and has created lots of jobs and lots of opportunities for people and lots of infrastructure and some pretty heady days over the last 10 years and turned us into a have province. So we've done pretty well, but Noia believes we can do better, a lot better. We know we are on the cusp of the next generation of oil and gas development. We clearly have the resources, as I just referred to. But in order to move from a strictly resource-based economy, we need to be looking further ahead. We need to leverage our resources to become a technology-based economy, an innovation economy, and a more entrepreneurial and internationally competitive economy. If we're going to maximize the benefits for all of us, operators, government, and the supply and services community, we need to all work together towards a shared vision as opposed to continuing to focus on one-off, ad hoc projects where we see a peak in employment and then an empty bull arm. But to do this, to build a successful long-term legacy industry like Norway, we need to refocus, regroup, and define where we need to be stronger, more competitive, and sustainable. Simply put, we need to redefine oil. Redefining oil is Noia's vision for a stronger, more beneficial, continuous oil and gas industry for Newfoundland and Labrador. The province's oil and gas industry has had 30-plus years of experience under its belt. We have benefited from that experience, as I said, but also, as I also said, we can do better. Our board set out to further understand the local environment, so we did work. We looked around the world at constituencies from around the world who have oil-based economies and tried to learn from them. We took a 30-year view to define what we believe the industry could achieve in our province over the long term and explored the guiding principles that could get us there. We defined a plan that could drive a more sustainable and competitive local oil and gas industry for Newfoundland and Labrador. We developed a vision to redefine oil in Newfoundland and Labrador based on collaboration, participation, and growth. Noia sees redefining oil as a renewed approach based on shared interest of operators, government, and the supply and services community to create an internationally competitive and sustainable industry. Internationally competitive and sustainable. Let's try to reduce our peaks and valleys and look towards an oil-based economy as opposed to just an extraction economy. Moving forward with this renewed approach will support better planning and reduce risk and uncertainty for both the operator and supply communities and greatly contribute to the industrial capability and strength of our province. And how do we realize this vision? Through a collaborative partnership between industry and government that will establish the vision and strategy and set it in motion, change the way we approach supplier development in the industry, enhance local expertise and skills, realign project agreements so they focus on the long term, and fully realize the Atlantic Accord's economic growth and development purpose. Let's take a few moments now to speak further on each of these items, which will result in a competitive, sustainable industry for Newfoundland and Labrador. First, we start with renewed vision and strategy, developed in partnership with government and industry. The vision needs to be long-term and include a strategy for the further development of a competitive and competent local supply and service community. Specifically, we see the creation of an industry council to formulate that vision and strategy, and later on, an industry development agency for the implementation, monitoring, and feedback of the strategy. The establishment of these bodies is a critical first step. Noia envisions the establishment of an industry council which should play a pivotal role in shaping the future of our industry. It must adopt global governance best practices and support objective, well-informed policymaking across government for the supply and service sector. It should also include representation from across the industry and government and include cabinet ministers, representatives from oil companies, the supply and services community, labor and research, and development and educational communities. Industry champions and industry stewards need to be appointed to ensure everything is on track. Last week, we heard Liberal leader Dwight Ball announce his party's plans to, if elected, establish an entity responsible for developing a new long-term vision for the industry. This aligns with Noia's strategy, and whichever political party is elected, we'll be lobbying heavily for the implementation of all of this, what I'm announcing today. Noia also sees the need for development of an industry development agency, which should be responsible for driving the strategy, goals, and objectives as determined by the Industry Council, and dialogue with the Council on the progress and the challenges. It must be able to establish strong relationships with the operator and supply and service community, the educational and research organizations, and the CNLOPB. It should have a degree of independence and autonomy, and should have the ability to become involved and influential in day-to-day and long-term challenges, and play a vital role in shaping the future of the industry. It should have the ability to set its own priorities and monitor for full compliance with appropriate project agreements. Next, and very importantly, project agreements must be aligned with strategy and long-term objectives for our province and for the supply industry, as opposed to the short-term objectives that we've seen in the past. And the short-term objectives have obviously led, they haven't been all bad, they've led to some very long-term improvements or long-term benefits for the province, but we need to just take that long-term strategy, Noia believes. Agreements must strike the balance between short-term development opportunities, which we're not going to get rid of tomorrow, short-term development opportunities and putting people to work. Politically, we're not going to get rid of that, but we need to align our vision so that we have the right balance between the short-term, we keep some short-term objectives while developing a longer-term economy. International cases confirm the importance of knowledge generation and transfer, technology development and innovation to develop competitive supply chains able to meet the industry's growing needs. Noia believes it is necessary to direct this within project agreements, since optimal local knowledge and technology development will not occur spontaneously in the current context. Noia recommends that project agreements shall include work that contributes to the development of appropriate skills and expertise for the long-term development of our industry, technology transfer agreements that target technology areas for long-term resource development, R&D expenditure plans that are made with input from local businesses and organizations. These should be appropriately invested in targeted IP creation founded in the province. Define local participation in targeted areas of project engineering and construction management, and define local participation and knowledge transfer in project work undertaken outside the province. In the Hibernia days, we were pretty big on joint ventures, not so much anymore. But we think that led to some success, and we should take a look at it again. With regard to supplier development, we do not believe that procurement policy based solely on full and fair opportunity without other mechanisms for industry sustainability can achieve optimal results. Procurement and evaluation policies can strengthen and support local supplier development, and the oversight agency should play a critical role in this. In alignment with the strategy, we believe appropriate procurement rules addressing monitoring, openness, and transparency, and early input and engagement from the local supplier community on contracting plans, including bid packaging and local participation strategies, are necessary to support local participation and to drive local participation. As well, local participation-driven tender evaluation criteria and weightings and contract terms can support and strengthen local suppliers. Lastly, specific plans for local technology transfer should be included in any and all awards to major international contractors. Let me read that again. Lastly, specific plans for local technology transfer should be included in any and all awards to major international contractors. Finally, it is important to remember that the purpose of the Atlantic Accord was to recognize the right of Newfoundland and Labrador to be the principal beneficiary of our oil and gas resources, and to ensure the pace and manner of development optimize the social and economic benefits to Canada and to Newfoundland and Labrador. The Accord was also meant to ensure that the offshore area is managed in a way that would maximize the benefits accruing to Newfoundland and Labrador. Given this purpose, Noia believes that the benefits provisions of the Atlantic Accord can play an important role in helping creating a sustainable industry. New guidelines and industry-wide procurement standards will help fully realize the Accord's economic growth and development purpose and support supplier development and enhancement of expertise and skills. I could get into a whole talk on the Atlantic Accord, and I'm tempted to, but I will stop. As well, the transfer of technology and know-how to Newfoundland and Labrador suppliers is critical for future success and plans. This must have clearly defined objectives, timelines, and measurable outcomes are required to achieve positive results, the positive results we seek. There is no doubt that the benefits provisions of the Atlantic Accord have played a crucial role in the development of our supply and service industry, and Noia believes it must continue to do so, but some teeth can be added. My words. And there you have it, Noia's vision for the future of the oil and gas industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. Clearly, though, we cannot do it alone. When we first began drilling in the 1960s, we had no idea what was out there. We had no idea of the potential impact the oil and gas industry would have to this province. But now we do. Today, we know that a mere fraction of our offshore contains 12 billion barrels of oil. And oil companies recognize this potential as seen by the $1.2 billion in work commitments resulting in the recent land sale. This means that right off our shores, we have a nation-building resource that, if managed correctly, could secure this province's future and be a major contributor to Canada for decades and decades to come. We need to seize this incredible opportunity. To do this, all parties must be aligned. We need to work together to leverage these resources to transform our economy into one that is technological, innovative, and entrepreneurial. The reality is that if we continue to keep doing things the way we have, when the oil is no longer out there and disappears, so will this resource-based, short-term economy that we've built around it. We will be left with no oil and nothing to show for the decades of hard work that we put into building the industry. It is imperative that we look to the future, We need to transform our economy into one that looks beyond the resource that leverages it to become innovative, technological, an entrepreneurial, and an export-driven, internationally competitive economy. And so today we are calling on government and industry to share in Noia's vision and help us move in the right direction in order to seize the opportunity, realize their potential, and create the legacy that our children and grandchildren deserve. Thank you very much.